And so last week we were talking about, the question was, who are you going to follow? Because when you begin to look at these guys, they were all Jewish, different backgrounds, different facets and everything. And so many times we put a total emphasis on the 12, and there's more than 12 that was there. And tonight we're going to go into Luke chapter 6, okay? And we're going to actually go to verses 12 through 16. And what you're going to find here is a group of guys and their names, okay, of the 12. Because a lot of times when you begin to start looking at these guys, some of them are really not well known. It's just kind of mentioned, and that's it. And the other fascinating thing about it is that the perspective of when these guys were actually called, Jesus, he started his ministry now, and he's got these guys, and they're following him, and they're going from place to place, and Jesus is following along. And you're going to find right after this that Jesus is going to go up on the mountain. He's headed to the mountain to start some teaching with a lot of people after this occurs. And for those that were here this morning, if you remember, we were over in Matthew chapter 5 of the Sermon on the Mount. And if you follow Luke chapter 6 over after these verses that we're going to read, you're also going to find the Beatitudes or in the Sermon on the Mount, but you're going to find they're different. They're different between Matthew's writing and Luke's writing. And some people kind of say, well, Luke was cherry picking these and that and stuff. And so sometimes you're going to see this in the writings because you're going to see two people writing about the same incident, but from a different perspective as you go through here. So in Luke chapter 6, verses 12 through 16, here we go. It says, during those days that he went out to the mountain to pray, and he spent all night. Sound familiar? He spent all night in prayer to God. Okay. When daylight came, he summoned his disciples, and he chose 12 of them, that he also named them apostles. Okay. Now, and this is why all of the time you're going to hear me. It's not that I'm trying to correct people. I'm not so dogmatic, but I hear people all the time say Jesus had 12 disciples. No, he didn't. Okay. He actually had 120 disciples. Okay. 120, 170, I can't remember. I want to say 120. And then at the day of Pentecost, I think it was 170. But he had 120 disciples, but he had 12 who were apostles. And there's a differentiation between the disciples and the apostles. Okay? And he gave them, these were the ones that he chose. Simon, whom he also named Peter, okay, changed his name, and Andrew, his brother. So you have brothers, Peter and Andrew, okay? James and John, brothers. Philip and Bartholomew, they weren't. And then you have Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot. And here we go. Judas, the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Okay? So a lot of times when people, and this is what happens a lot of times, when people say, well, Judas betrayed him, you need to be careful because there was two Judases. The one Judas, who was the son of James, did not betray him. It was a very specific one who was Judas Iscariot. Okay? And so you'll begin to start seeing some things about these. So here you got these 12 guys. Now you got to understand something. And this is kind of what kind of alluding to this morning. Okay? And that sometimes we don't catch it. And we don't get it. And so, now I ain't gonna draw. Every one of you were created by God. The Bible says He knew you even before you knew Him. Now, here's the deal. You got to think of this for a moment. God created you for a reason. It wasn't just escape through life. And with that reason, He made you internally. Your makeup was therefore a specific for a very specific purpose. Okay? Everything that happens in your life, and this is where sometimes, for instance, we don't understand. And you look at that and you say, God, what in the world are you thinking? But yet, God says that all things work together for the good for those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. Now, I don't know about y'all. When I look at something like that, I'm thinking, how in the world can something good come out of this? But you have to remember this. And here's what God said. What Satan meant for evil, God will change to make it good. You look at the life of Job. Satan meant to destroy him. And yet God turned around and made it good. So these guys were each born at a certain time in history with certain backgrounds, certain capabilities, certain qualities for a very specific reason. And you think about it for a moment. These 12 guys, and sometimes when you look at the characteristics of these guys later on, you would think, why in the world did you choose that guy to change the whole world? And failing to realize that, you know what? God chose us too for the same reason. And sometimes we miss the purpose that He has, okay? And so when you look at these guys and you see the names, how many of them do you really recognize? Simon Peter, Andrew, James and John, Philip,
That's kind of, yeah. Matthew and Thomas.
yeah, and Matthew. What do you know about him? I mean, you think about it. What do you really know about Matthew? You know, what you know about Matthew was he's a tax collector who threw a party after he got saved for all of his friends. I don't know anything else that's basically in here. And then I come to Thomas. What do you know about him? Dude has some issues. You know, And so we always call him a doubting Thomas. Unless I see, hey, I'm not going to believe. Unless I touch, I'm not going to believe. But yet, you don't find a lot about him in the Bible. And so what you really need to do is pick up some history books. The writings of Josephus and Philo are two of the best for Jewish historians that will give you some more background about how they went on after this and how they did change the world. Some of the things they are credited with is just phenomenal to see what God had done. You would never think, these guys, man, I see how they worked for 3 years with Jesus, and we don't get the rest of the story. And sometimes we finish this. Simon, the zealot, Judas, the son of James, brother, and Judas Iscariot. Yeah, we know about him, especially here. He's called a traitor. So we find some things. So a lot of times it's very hard, really, and you think about it for a minute. And this is where I'm bad at Bible trivia. If somebody was to come up to me and ask me, "Can you name the 12 apostles?" No, I might get 8. Because they're not ones that stick in our heads. Okay? They're just not somebody that we deem as important, but yet they were very important. Because they were the ones that started this movement. Everybody was waiting for Jesus to start the movement. Jesus trained them, they started the movement. I mean, he radically changed them. You talk about emboldened. Hey, they were hiding one day, afraid for their life, and then a few days later, on the day of Pentecost, hey, we're out front in the streets, and everybody's hearing the message. We don't care what part of the country that you came from, or what part of the world you came from. Hey, you're here, we're telling you about Jesus. And you think about it for a minute. Read the Bible. How many people do you see in listening to Jesus, does it record that any of them got saved? But on the first message that Peter and them preached, how many? Remember, it's 5,000, and that was not including that was men and women. That does not include the children, or I think that was men and didn't include the women and the children. So remember what Jesus told them. He says, "Hey guys," he says, "You think I do great things? You're going to do greater things." And they're thinking, us? I follow Joe Veal, and every week on Sunday he'll give an update of how many people were saved during that week, how many people that they reached in a little place called Malawi. Okay, and we don't recognize that in Malawi there's thousands of people, and the majority of that country is lost. And it is not unusual for 10 to 15,000 people coming to know the Lord. Now, understand, they have multitudes of teams. And not just one team, it's multitudes of teams going out. But they're going out, and about every week, they're starting about 10 to 15 churches or more. That'd be cool. 15,000 people, church starting with 1,000 people right off the bat. That's awesome. Except now you got to teach these people. And they all got needs. And I'm talking, they got some needs. And in so many ways. So here we go. When you begin to look at this, you see that some of these guys are educated. Okay? Peter was very educated. But then when you start looking at some of the other ones, they were not very educated at all. They were fishermen. You know, it didn't take a lot of education to learn how to fish and to be able to do these things. So when you begin to look at this, go to Acts chapter 17, verse number 6. Someone got it?
And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren into the rulers of the city, crying, "These that have turned the world upside down, or come hither also."
Yeah. Now think about this for a minute. Here is uneducated, maybe educated, plain people, and then all of a sudden these rulers bring them, and they're saying, "Here's the guys that have turned the world upside down." We talk about, you know, something happens that rocks our world. Hey, we're not rocking our world. It's turned upside down. And here he took these 12 guys and with them turned the world upside down. And think about it sometimes. And this is where, you know, like I said, my task is I want to finish well. I want at the end of the day, I want him to say, "Hey, you finished well. You did it. You made it." It isn't just, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." You hung in there. You stuck to it. And you finished the race very well. But think about it for a minute. If he took 12 uneducated, not very rich, because you think about it, Matthew was rich until he got saved. and then when he got saved, he says, "If I've done anything to anybody, if I've overtaxed anybody, I'm not going to give them back a penny for a penny. I'm going to give them 4 cents for every penny that I took. I'm going to give them 4 times what I overtaxed them." So you think about it for a minute. When Jesus told them, "Follow me and leave everything at home," he didn't have anything. He probably had to sell the house in order to pay all these people back. All of the stuff that, you know, he was taking. And so you think about it for a minute. If he can do that, what in the world do you think he could do with us in this community? Because there's more of us. We could turn this place upside down. And they were doing this. Now, something fascinating about these guys. Go over to Luke chapter 18 and verses 31 through 34.
Luke 18,
31 through 34.
Then he took the 12 aside and told them, "Listen, we're going to Jerusalem. Everything that is written through the prophets about the Son of Man will be accomplished. For he will be handed over to the Gentiles, and he will be mocked, insulted, spit on, and after they flog him, they will kill him, and he will rise on the 3rd day." They understood none of these things. This saying was hidden from them, and they did not grasp what was said.
Jesus telling them what's going to happen. And how much of it did they understand?
None of it.
So think about this for a minute. They have a very limited spiritual understanding. But what did they do? What did Acts say? Here are these men that have turned the world upside down. They didn't have the whole Bible. Their knowledge about Jesus was very limited. He said, he took them aside and he told them that, hey guys, we're going to Jerusalem, so that everything that's already been prophesied is going to be accomplished. And what did he say? He's going to be handed over to the Gentiles. He's going to be mocked, insulted, spit upon. They're going to flog him. Then they're going to kill him. And he's going to rise up on the third day. And they're sitting there saying, we have no clue what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about, Jesus. With a very limited knowledge. Now, they saw it happen. Okay? They saw him risen. But they didn't understand any of this stuff.
Did they have a printed Old Testament at this time?
They did. That is where you find like the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff. And what would happen is they didn't have bound Bibles. So let's say that they you would find basically like a. I got to remember this now, and it's this way, very specific because it is rolled up. In reading Hebrew, we read a book from left to right, front to back. Hebrew is totally different. Hebrew, you read from right to left, and you read from back to forward. Reason being, I'm writing on the scroll, and then I'm going up the scroll, and so I'm rolling it up. So when I unroll the scroll, what I find is the beginning of what they wrote. So that when I get to the end of the scroll, at the very top of the scroll, then I'm at the end of it. And so when I begin to roll it, because if I rolled it the other way, all the writing would be on the outside. This way the writing is on the inside. And so they would have these scrolls, and they've been written or transcribed to someone who wrote the words down. And then what would happen is they realized that we only got one copy of this. It's like you think about it. A book that only sells one copy doesn't make the #1 bestseller list. And so it would also be limited on how far it could reach. So what they would do is you had the tribe of Levi. And so basically what they're doing is there were certain ones of them who were tasked with transcribing from one parchment to another. And what they would do is they would write a whole line from right to left, and they would count the number of letters. And then they would come over to the one that they copied, and they would count the number of letters. They must match. Okay? And once they matched, they said, okay, now we go to the second line, and then the third line, and the fourth line. And think about it for a minute. If you're on a parchment and you've got 100 lines, and all of a sudden you got one of them wrong, then you got to start all over again. So they were very cautious to make sure that everything matched up. Okay, and so what they
Did they just hand out partial sections?
Yeah, and so what you would find is let's say for instance like the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis may have been, well, number one, the book of Genesis, it was the writing of Moses. Okay, and they believe that the book of Job was actually the oldest book in the Bible. That Job actually preceded Abraham, and was very well known and rich and everything. And sometimes we don't see the way that the books are written and the way that they're pieced together. So what would happen is, I've got the book of, so anyway, they would have, let's say about 40 or 50 of these parchments. And that may be the whole book of Genesis. And so what they would do is they would take these parchments and they would try to figure out, sometimes chronologically, how they fit. Because they were thoughts.
So they weren't marked chapter 1.
No. And honestly, when you get into some of the books today and you start looking, and you look at it, and they've got like chapter 1 and chapter 2, and you look at it and you think, why isn't this in chapter 1?
Yeah.
It's a continuum
Right,
of
and it all flows
yeah.
together.
And so what they did was they started dividing up, trying to divide up thoughts. Okay. Otherwise, what you would have is a huge book, and really, there was no punctuation either.
So it just, all the words just
Nonsense.
kind of like we talk.
But there is oh man, I gotta find it because I found it. I can't remember if I found it through an email or I found it through a Facebook post of one of these things that I'm following. But it's really neat because it does a timeline, okay? And it's really neat. For instance, Methuselah. You know when Methuselah died? They went through and they started calculating based upon where it said that such and such was born in such and such a time frame, and this person was born here, and it was there. If I remember this right, Methuselah died at the right before the flood. And they start calculating, where is Noah in relation to Abraham? And all of this stuff. And it's all intertwined. And they do it in a circle. You know? And it is absolutely amazing, you know, to see this. But I'm sorry, that's for another day and another time. But you think about it. How much knowledge did they have?
That's why I was asking if they had knowledge of the Old Testament prophecies.
They had probably bits and pieces. I mean, they had all of the books, okay, up through Malachi, okay. But how much of it had they really been exposed to? Now, were they exposed to all of them? I don't think so. But I think they were, number one, I think probably every one of them were exposed to like the book of Isaiah, because you'll find Jesus quoting the book of Isaiah. You also find him quoting other passages, okay? And I think that probably these were passages that they had been exposed to, that they probably knew something about. And so they heard it, and Jesus is reinforcing that you had heard about this Messiah, and I'm the one that's coming to fulfill these prophecies, and they still didn't get it. And now we can, and sometimes, remember 2020, hindsight is really good, or being Monday after Sunday football game. Monday you can be the quarterback if they'd only ran this play, or if they'd run this play, if they'd only done this, if they'd only done that, or if you're playing Cincinnati Reds, if only the manager had done this and took this pitcher out before he threw that pitch.
Today, okay.
They did it right yesterday too. Against
Took extra innings again. They did it really.
Yeah, but yesterday it didn't. No, I mean, they held them to 2 hits. And it's like all of a sudden, yeah, you guys are starting to play. It's down towards the end, dudes. But think about it for a minute. How much more knowledge that we have that they didn't have? And they turned the world upside down. If we could do what it was,
Look bad to them.
it looks terrible. I mean, seriously, this is why we have a major issue in the church today, and this is why I told you this morning, and I didn't mean it in a bad way when I said I'm going to get in your face, okay? I didn't mean it in a bad way.
You already did that this morning, so you're already done. Just by your message, you saw that on Facebook. Come on.
Well, I saw what I told Linda, I know how I can make money. I'm going to open up a shoe shop.
For steel-toed shoes.
For steel-toed shoes. sell them on Sunday. But just see mine. She said, you know, she was looking for steel-toed shoes. I said, hey, I'm looking for a whole armor, man. Because, and it is, you know, and I have to be careful sometimes. But really, you know, there had been recently really struggling, you know, and I have been struggling in a lot of areas that I don't tell, you know, a lot about. I pray a lot about and stuff, and it's like, why aren't they getting it? And sometimes you feel like, am I just spinning my wheels? You know, God, what's going on? And then, like I said, all of a sudden, you know, God, and don't take it, none of y'all take this that I'm talking about you, but it might be you, okay? But it's not in a bad way. I grew up in church. You know, my mom and dad were alcoholics when I was a child. Okay, so I grew up in that atmosphere. My uncles, almost every one of my uncles on my mom's side, all died of cirrhosis of the liver and issues related to really moonshine more than beer. Okay, because I mean they were bootleggers galore. Until they divorced the sheriff's daughters. As soon as they both divorced the sheriff's daughter, they all both ended up in jail because the sheriff was ticked out. How dare you do? But they both died young. I mean, they died in their 40s and early 50s. You know, and all of the girls, my mom and then I still got a couple aunts, that have all lived basically into their 80s. And my grandmother lived in her 80s. So I was exposed to it, but I was never a partaker. And I shared with you, when I went into service, number one, the first thing they tried to do is get you to try beer. And it was wrong, because the first thing they tried to get me to drink was a dark beer. And if you drink a dark beer in Germany, it's like licorice. And it's like 20% alcohol. I mean, it is nasty. That was the end of my beer drinking days, okay? But again, you know, we started bowling. And in bowling, they did beer frames. Well, I didn't drink beer, you know? So it's okay, so what are you going to buy me? I'll have a rum and Coke. And I mean, I still love Coke, and the rum you could taste some, you know. And it was, I mean, those were the things I drank. That and screwdrivers, because I loved, I loved orange juice, but I never got drunk. And I was always I always was a designated driver, and I don't know what it was, but I never got drunk. So when someone comes up and says, you got drunk and you threw up and all this stuff, I had no clue what you're talking about. I can relate to you in throwing up because I've had food poisoning. One time I was in the service, and a couple times after that and stuff, and so I can relate in that aspect, but I can't do that. I can't relate when someone talks to me about drug addiction. I can't relate to someone that talks to me about an addiction to a pill. And I'm sitting there saying, God, why in the world are you bringing all these people across my life? I haven't got a clue what they're going through. I can talk to them about Jesus, but when they start talking to me about these addictions and stuff, I'm sitting here thinking, God, I don't know what you're talking about. And honestly, I've been fighting this for 2 years or more now in this and saying, you keep bringing these people across my path. I don't know what to tell them. Huh? I'm right in the middle of all of this stuff. Honestly. I'm sitting here talking to a lady across the street. She's asking me, for medication for her diabetes. Oh, okay, I can talk to you about your medication for your diabetes, but I can tell you that what you're asking me for is going to cost you a lot more than what you're asking me for. So you ain't talking about diabetes medicine, So yeah, I know those things, and I can impact those things. But he keeps bringing me anxiety, depression. Anxiety, yeah, I can talk a little bit about anxiety because I do have anxious attacks when I'm having to cross a bridge in a car and I'm driving and going across the water. And I walked across a bridge all my life as a kid. And I've had to go back and remember. I had that fear then. I would walk across a dam and I didn't know how to swim. I would walk across railroad trestles going across the Great Miami River there between New Miami.
It's scary watching them kids go across the dams in Hamilton. I used to see that.
And I was one of them. And I watched some kids doing it one time and told them, you don't need to do that. And the next thing you know, they slipped and they went under the water. Yep. And I told them, I can tell you where they're at. We've been there enough and seen you bring out enough people, we can tell you exactly where they're at. They're not down the river, they're up underneath there. Because it rolls right back up underneath there. Great catfish up underneath there. Huge suckers. So I can relate to some of this. And I keep asking, God, what are you doing? Until I finally realized, hey, you understand what I told you? You got it, but you don't get it. You understand that you look to see where God's working in your life and come join you. And you have come to join me. You understand that part, but you're missing the other part. I'm still working in your life, but I'm working in your life through other people. And you need to quit making the excuses that you don't know, because I've equipped you. I just want to know, are you available to listen to me? To do this. And I've had some, me and him have had some long conversations at night. To a point where I had to say, you got my attention. I am one of those that is not educated in this. But I've gone through enough to start learning. And he says, okay, now you've learned the basics. Now, watch out. And this is what I'm saying. I have no clue what God's about to do, but I know God's about to do something. And whenever he does, whenever he's ready to do something, you're attacked. And I know that. That's why a lot of times when I start getting attacked, I know what's coming. And so it doesn't impact me as much as it did. And that's why, a couple of weeks ago, I asked y'all to pray because I knew the attack, and I know where it would lead me to if I didn't do something about it. And it was like, hey guys, I need your prayers because Satan is really doing some things that I know where it would lead if I don't get the message that's there. And so sometimes I feel like the uneducated disciples. I've heard it. I've got the numbers. I got the facts. But I just don't understand it all.
See, I experienced that with the first few sessions of Preach here.
Yeah.
Because I had never been around anyone that had anything to do with drugs. And 3 of my students that went through my class twice had lost their children to overdoses.
Yeah.
And it was like, Lord, what am I doing here? Is exactly how. But because I trusted in him,
Yeah.
I was able to work through that. And 2 of the 3 of those have become very dear friends.
Yeah. And we need to start again. We need to start another one. We got some that really need some help in going through this. But that's what, and that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we need to understand we don't need all the facts. All we need is to know that he says, I'm doing this. And so you understand what I'm doing. And this is why I was talking about this morning, guys and gals. I have learned to look to see where he's working and to join him. And that's why my prayers are now. I'm understanding. Jesus is asking me, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And let me tell you something. When you understand that and you get it, and I haven't got it all, okay, because there's still more to come. But when you begin to understand that Jesus is working there and he's waiting for you to say, what do you want me to do? It will change you. And that's what I was hoping you got out of that this morning. Because we've got the forgiveness. The forgiveness is there. It's the understanding of redemption, of what he's done. And he's back here. It's like a father coming to his children. And you're wanting the best for your kids. And the kids come up to you. What do you ask them? What do you want me to do? I'm afraid. What do you want me to do? I've got this issue in my life. What do you want me to do? We can understand that with our own kids or our children. Well, hold on a minute. Who's the father here? Who's the one that's interceding for us? That's Jesus. And honestly, it is, again, like I said, an epiphany. Yeah, it is a life-changing thing. And it's I don't know where it's going. I have no idea where this is taking me in this journey. But I know one thing. You've placed me here for a reason, for this time and for this season. And man alive, I got to do something with this season. I don't want to lose it. I've only lost other seasons that I missed it, you know, and it helps us. Oh man, what else we got? Okay, not only did they not have all of the knowledge, you think about these guys. Were they humble? They struggle with humility. Think about it. Walking down the road, James, John, and Peter, Jesus. And they're arguing. Hey, he's going to go to the throne, and he's got a kingdom, and the person who sits on the right-hand side of that person, that is the place of prestige. Where's Jesus sitting? At the right hand of the Father. The best seat is at the right hand. Okay? And you have to think about this for a minute. And again, Jewish tradition. The place of honor, whenever the king would throw a feast, the person of honor always sat to the right of the king, not to the left. And when they passed the food and they served, you know who they served first? The king, and to the right. And so James and John, Peter wants to know, hey, where's my place going to be in this? And James and John are saying, hey, hold on, what makes you so special? You know, hey, we're the sons of Zebedee, buddy. We're the go-getters. We've got this stuff. You know, when we speak, man, it's lightning. We're just out there making the noise. You, Peter, you only speak up when something's going on. But we're always talking. We're always doing this stuff. And then they're in the argument, and what do? Hey, Mom, you go ask Jesus. Which one of us can have that seat? They're even competing among themselves. And now they want Mom to go to Jesus to pick a favorite. There is no lack of humility here. They are jealous, both bold and stuff. Mark chapter 9, verse 33 to 35. Got it? Go for it.
Yeah. Mark 9, 33 to 35.
Yeah.
Then he came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the way? But they were silent, because on the way they had been arguing with one another about who was the greatest. Sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, if anyone wants to be first, he must be last of all and servant of all.
Yeah. Hey, y'all want to know who's going to be sitting next to me? The one with the most humility. The one who knows that this is not about them.
But that was hard for them to swallow.
Oh. Well, you think about it for a minute. You're sitting there and you think that you are out of earshot of Jesus. And you're carrying on.
And you're bickering back and forth. Yeah, I can imagine.
And then all of a sudden, you get up here, and Jesus is kind of stopped. And now there's a confrontation here. He didn't hear us, did he? He said, what were y'all arguing about? What were y'all discussing about? See, they didn't get it. Think about it for a minute. Remember what the Bible said? He would come and see the crowd and he would look on them with compassion because he knew what their heart was. Hey guys, you want a real life? I told you about this and you've seen it. Let's really put this into action here. Remember this story that I was telling you over here? Let's bring it home. What were you arguing about? And what did it say? You ever been so embarrassed you couldn't talk? They didn't have an issue before about talking. They didn't have an issue before when they're sitting there arguing who's going to be the best and who's the greatest. But they're tongue-tied now. I wondered if Jesus said, "Cat, got your tongue?" Hey, Peter, James and John, y'all never had a problem speaking before. What's going on now? But look, he knew their heart, and he knew what they were arguing about. And what did he say? Don't you understand that the first shall be last, and the last shall be first? You want to know who that place is reserved for? The most humblest. Man, you talking about being brought down. As Robin would say, holy smoke, Batman. What are we going to do now? Go to Matthew chapter 14, 31. Show it. I got a couple other things real quick that I want to show you. And that'll conclude this part of it. Matthew chapter 14, 31.
Immediately Jesus reached out his hand, caught hold of him, and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?"
Yeah. Now remember how we always called him Doubting Thomas? It wasn't just Thomas. All of these guys lived in an era of what you see is what you get. Well, if Jesus is alive, I got to see him. But yet, even though they saw Jesus constantly doing miracles, and think about this for a minute. Who was around when Jesus was doing these miracles? He didn't do it in private. They were there, they saw it. And then what's he do? He takes them by the hand, pulls them aside and says, "Oh, ye of little faith. What's wrong with you? This isn't what you see is what you get. You got to understand there's more to this than what you see." Next one, Mark chapter 14, verses 46 through 50. You got it, Debbie, go for it.
What was it again?
14, 46 to 50.
46. Then they took hold of him and arrested him. And one of those who stood by drew his sword, struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his ear. But Jesus said to them, "Have you come out with swords and clubs as though I were a criminal, to capture me? Every day I was among you, teaching in the temple complex, and you didn't arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then they all deserted him and ran away.
Yeah. So think about this. They're in the Garden of Gethsemane. And Jesus is praying, and they're praying with him. Okay? And what did Peter say? "Even though others desert you, Lord, I'll not desert you. I am committed to you." And here they come. Clubs, swords, and everything attacking Jesus. And what did Peter do? He took a sword out, man, whacked off that guy's ear. "I'm committed to you, Lord. I will die for you." And then what happens as soon as they arrest him?
They deserve.
They deserted him. Remember how we tell him, Lord, I love you so much, I'm committed to you. And what he's saying is commitment is not enough. Every day you're going to have to renew that commitment. Every day. Because there's going to be a struggle tomorrow. There's going to be a struggle the next day. And a struggle the next day. And if we don't continually renew that commitment day after day after day, we're going to fail. Because you can't do it by yourself. It isn't enough to say, Lord, I give you my life, and then stop. Tomorrow I'm going to give you my life again. And the next day, Lord, if I'm living, I'm giving you that day. And the next day, if I'm living, I'm going to give you that day. Okay? So they had a lack of commitment. Last one is found in Matthew chapter 17, verses 14 through 17.
Is 14 through 17?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Matthew 14?
Matthew 17, verses 14 through 17.
And when they were come to the multitude, there came a certain man kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on me, my son, for he is a lunatic
Mm-hmm.
and sore vexed for all time. He falleth not into the fire. He falleth not into the fire, and off into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me.
Yeah. So you look at this. Here's this boy. He's possessed. And so he comes to Jesus and he says, hey, Lord, my son is really, he's possessed. And so he says, he hasn't, mine says that he has seizures and suffers severely. Because back then, when someone had seizures, they believed that they were possessed by demons. Okay? And so he says he often falls into the fire and into the water. Have you ever been around someone who has seizures? If they're in a certain environment, they're totally unaware of it, no control, and things can happen, okay? I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him. What did Jesus give them the power to do? He said, I give you power to heal the sick and raise the dead. This guy knew that they could do it. He brings his son to them, and he says, I brought it to them, and they couldn't heal it. So Jesus replied, you unbelieving and rebellious generation, how long will I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring him to me. And then later on, if you look at it, you'll see Jesus rebukes the demons. Okay, first. Then he rebukes his disciples. And he says, because they asked him, why couldn't we drive him out, Lord? And what did he say? Because of your little faith, he told them. For I assure you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will tell this mountain, move from here and there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not come except by prayer and fasting. So you think about this for a minute. What we've learned about these guys. We learned that they had limited spiritual understanding, right? We learned they lacked humility. We learned that they lacked faith. We learned that they lacked commitment, and we learned that they had a lapse of power. Now you think about this for a minute. All of these things that happen, but yet you come to Acts chapter 1, when the Holy Spirit came upon them, they didn't lack power. They didn't lack faith. They didn't lack commitment. And let me say this to you. They found humility. And guess what? They also found the spiritual understanding that they needed. Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time, and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30, with our morning worship following at 10:45. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with the Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.